A week ago, Governor Mark Dayton vetoed a piece of legislation that would have made it easier for you and I to defend ourselves against criminals or other people that may want to harm us or our family. It was called a Castle Doctrine bill. Opponents called it the Shoot First, Ask Questions Later bill. It was not supported by any major law enforcement agencies or by any major county attorney's offices, and the governor vetoed it. However, it was supported by the majority in the House and Senate. And at a time when we've been so divided in St. Paul over a number of issues, it's rare that you have the Senate approving this bill 40-23 and the House 85-47, which means bipartisan support, with many rural Democrats joining Republicans in supporting this bill. So why didn't the Castle Doctrine pass? Well, Governor Dayton claims it's because Minnesotans already have the basic right to defend themselves when they feel they are threatened. And he also said it's because law enforcement felt that they may be at risk if, in fact, this bill went through of being fired upon more easily. Well, if it doesn't really change anything, then why wouldn't the governor sign the bill? Wouldn't police officers not be in any more risk today as they were yesterday? The truth is, this bill did a few things besides just talk about the Castle Doctrine, which basically states that any person's home is their castle and they have a right to defend it at all costs. Although technically, the way a lot of county attorneys look at the law, you have an obligation to retreat, even from your own home, if you can, before using deadly force. This bill would have clarified that and said you do not have to retreat from your home, your yard, your boat, your car, your hotel, your apartment, or any place else you are, just because you could. You would be able to stand your ground. Now, I really think this kind of a bill shows the difference between greater Minnesota and the cities. Since when you look at those Democrats that voted for this bill, many of them, as I mentioned, were from greater Minnesota. Well, by our own local county sheriff's account a few years ago, when I asked him how many homes does he think have a loaded weapon in the area, he put the number at roughly about 80%. Now, that is by no means a scientific analysis. That is just a personal opinion of a law enforcement person here. Now, at 80%, that's pretty high, yet we have minimal incidents of gun violence right here in the Lakes area. Because many of us have grown up around firearms. Many of us have grown up shooting firearms, hunting, fishing, enjoying the outdoors we have. While others in the Twin Cities, their number one exposure to firearms is in action movies. Yeah, and that's sad. It's part of the reason I've thought that firearm safety should be a required course in K-12 education. Maybe one day we'll get to that point, but as it is, we aren't there now. I really think Governor Dayton vetoed this bill because of fear. Fear that the same police unions that were so important to him in getting elected a few years ago might turn against him since they didn't like this bill. However, the same complaints that I heard about this Castle Doctrine bill were the exact same complaints that we heard when Minnesota looked at the conceal and carry law. Now, since the conceal and carry law has been passed, has Minnesota turned into the wild, wild west? In fact, how often do you hear about a law-abiding citizen with their conceal and carry permit committing a crime with that gun? Not very often, do you? And I think if Castle Doctrine would have been passed, you'd have heard the same thing. Responsible Minnesotans would have been responsible with it. No doubt in my mind. You would have not seen an increase in any way in violence, I do not believe. I think what you would have seen is a case where you and I as legal residents and citizens would have been protected. And Governor Dayton cited a Supreme Court case. Went all the way to the Supreme Court where a man defended his yard. Felt he was an imminent threat, him and his family. But that's the point. It took the Supreme Court to acquit that man in years of court hearings. If this bill got signed, you and I as residents would avoid that. But I don't honestly care what any governor tells me or any legislator tells me. I will be judged by 12 before I will be carried by 6. And that's something I think all Minnesotans should live by. If you are threatened, you have the right to act as you need to act. And may the chips fall where they may.